Now, one of the biggest pitfalls of CDKTF is that it's not able to do a dependency property passing from one stack to another. And before I get to that, I need to explain a little bit of changes in the code because I used to explain that having your backend on main.ts would be enough, but it's actually not the case. You need to have your backend in the actual Terraform stack, and so I've got that here. So you have the S3 backend. I named it CDTF for the key, and so on. And the other one, this particular one actually creates the bucket itself. The other one creates the role. And what I'm trying to do is pass the bucket name as a part of the ARN to the role, so that the role would have access to the bucket. And this one also has another S3 backend, but the key is different. So if I were to keep the key the same, it would uh, one state would override the other, and that's obviously not the case that you don't want to do. But I wanted to be able to pass in values from one state file to another. So like my S3 bucket would create the S3 bucket, get its name and everything, and then it would pass that name to the role. And I know bucket names aren't exactly something that we should be setting them ourselves, and you can do that. But like say something like other things, like for example IDs, if something like an AWS generated ID, you can't get that until you actually run a Terraform apply. So CDK actually solves this by having a token value for those things. So it will be determined at deployment time. So there's basically a placeholder value that says, hey, I'm going, this is dependent from this other CloudFormation stack or so on, and it will be determined at deployment time, and it won't be determined now. Terraform unfortunately doesn't have such capability, and there's a long thread going on in GitHub. I can link it down below. And therefore, because of that limitation, it actually sort of fails. So if I were to do a diff on my second stack, right, before deploying my first stack, so this bucket is actually not deployed at this time. If I were to do a diff on my second stack, it fails. And notice the error that actually occurs, and it'll show you in just a second. First, unlike normal CDK, it actually doesn't do the dependency stack first, right? Even if you were to add dependency and then you say bucket, and that doesn't change anything whatsoever. And the error itself is wherever it's being used. So this is where the string interpolation is happening. R and AWS S3 : and then there's this line, right? So this is the data Terraform remote state that you would use in Terraform to say, go get this value from that other Terraform remote state. But that state doesn't exist at all, right? That state is that bucket has not yet been deployed, and so you need a placeholder value here, but there's no concept of a placeholder value. Um, so if I were to deploy this, if I were to deploy my first stack, for example, and then I do the Terraform plan or CDKTF diff on the second stack, then it's just fine, because now it knows how to get the actual value, right? That state now exists. See, it works now because that state now exists. It's able to get the value. And if you look at the ARN right here, it says ARN is known after apply. So if you want to take a look at the raw value of the ARN, you can take a look at the CDKTF JSON file. And that's actually in the CDKTF out stacks, and then the stack name that you gave it under the normal CDKTF folder that you've got. And so the raw value is right here, right? So ARN AWS S3 ARN AWS S3 : and then it gets the string interpolated value. It basically just a string interpolates a value from the data Terraform remote state. But because that exists now, it's not having any issues. And that's actually on Terraform's end, because Terraform makes sure that that value already exists. Now, this is a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that Terraform is explicit to the point where wherever you're getting the data from, it has, like, it already must exist, which is a surefire way of saying, I know this data is going to be here. And so as long as this data here, then my plan will be okay and I don't have any issues, right? So you run into less errors that way. The bad thing is that if you have a state or stack dependency where you're trying to pass a value from one stack to another and you want to add a dependent stack, so you want to run the first stack first, but a Terraform plan or CDKTF diff doesn't actually deploy the stack, so the state will not exist, and this is looking for a state, none of it will be created in the first place, right? So you explicitly need to deploy the dependent stack manually first before you deploy the secondary stack. And I know I added this add dependency, and let's go ahead and test it out. Let's go ahead and destroy the first stack, right? And we know that oh, I've got, yeah, I need to. We know that it's going to fail on Terraform plan or CDKTF diff. But what if because now that we added this add dependency, does it automatically deploy the so if I were to deploy it rather than do a diff, does it automatically deploy the first stack? Like, am I going to see my first stack here, or is it going to go straight to the second stack? And it looks like it's going to go straight to the second stack because the following dependencies are not included in the stacks to run. Either add them or ignore missing stacks. Now, what does that mean? The following dependencies are not included in the stacks to run. Oh, I see. So I can actually my first stack. So then, okay, that, all right. Well, stop. Let's do a diff. And this likely will still not work. The plan for the first stack will work. And it looks like it's the only thing that's going to run because it can't take two different stacks for plan. And so if you do a Terraform deploy or a CDKTF deploy, then you can add multiple stacks, which then includes the dependent stack, but it gives you a little error. It's like, hey, on the CLI, you didn't include the dependent stack. And therefore, you need to include the dependent stack, which is a little bit of an asinine, I must admit, because I'm already including that add dependency here. Like, just do it for me. If I'm deploying this stack, make sure just deploy this stack for me. That's the whole point. But anyways, I digress. So that's one of the biggest pitfalls of Terraform is that you have to explicitly state on the CLI that you want to deploy the dependent stack rather than from code, and Terraform plan or CDKTF diff will just not work because it's looking at the Terraform state because there's no placeholder value, right? So, and that's what I wanted to portray today. I'll see you guys next time. Apologies for the late video. I was a little sick. I am gonna continue growing with more and more videos, and so yeah, expect some changes. Bye, guys.